بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلوات وتم التسليمات على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So after some hiatus, which I apologize for, we're resuming our sessions reading in the topic of Maliki Fiqh from the book تدريب السالك إلى قراءة أقرب المسالك في مذهب الإمام مالك رضي الله عنه. And as we've said in our introductory session some time ago, this is like a what's called a mukhtasar of a mukhtasar. So the mukhtasar genre or abridgment genre is something that you find in all of kind of Islamic pedagogy, more or less, that originated in roughly the 7th, 8th century of Hijrah. So at 600 years to that, so 12th, 13th century. And prior to that, when people studied something like Fiqh or something like even Aqidah, they read much longer books. And those books were based upon primary source material that usually came from the Imam himself. So in our case, Imam Malik, it's said that he left 150 volumes of riwayat, 150 volumes of narrations. So the major work in the Maliki school then, in contrast to say the Shafi'i school, was to put an interpretive process towards all of these narrations and determine which ones were the soundest and which ones carried the most weight in terms of the relationship back to the Quran and Sunnah. The Shafi'i school, Imam al-Shafi'i didn't leave that much back around after he left, but he wrote the rules for the interpretive process. So the scholars of the Shafi'i school took those rules and then they themselves applied them to get the rulings that they would need in the future. So for the Malikiyah, we have quite a bit of what Imam Malik said, probably more than any other Imam of the four. And he left al-Muwatta, and he also has other books called Ummahat al-Madhab, the mothers of the Madhab, or the primary books, which the most primary one being al-Mudawwana of Suhnun, who narrated from Abdurrahman ibn al-Qasim, who was a direct student of Malik, who studied with him 20 years or so. And so what we have here is like the creme of the creme, kind of like putting everything for us in a very succinct, fairly easy way to digest and understand. So, it's unfortunate today that people kind of dismiss a lot of this process because they don't have an understanding of it, and they think it's like, so what, one guy said something. So who's Malik, and who's Abu Hanifa, and who's Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, and who's Ahmed ibn Hanbal, and who's al-Awza'i, and who's al-Layth ibn Sa'ad. They're human beings and they can make mistakes, and so why should we listen to what they say? But that is that's either misunderstanding or mischaracterization. And if we're being charitable, we'll say they don't understand. If we're not being charitable, we'll say no, actually mischaracterizing. Because the truth is, it's not just one person. It's many, many people. And we're talking about a historical process. So it's not even confined to one period in history. We're talking about, like in this school, Imam Malik and tabaqat. Tabaqat means hierarchy of generations after him. We're also studying this material and fine-tuning it and refining it and getting it to the point where they can say, this is the mashhur, right? This is the dominant opinion, and we are certain this is Allah's ruling in this particular thing. And even when they say it with that certainty, they still say, Wallahu a'lam. They're saying Allah knows best. But we did our part, what Allah asked of us, to apply our ijtihad, our juristic effort and reasoning in deriving these rulings, and this is what we've arrived to. So there's no sounder way to practice Islam today. I challenge anyone to come up with a sounder way than this. If you can, fine. But I don't think you can, because this is something that has been transmitted from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, to our present time. And it's worked, is the main thing also. So when we say the Maliki school or we say the Shafi'i school, we're not talking about sects, obviously, in Islam. We're not talking about different belief systems. We're talking about interpretive methods that developed into madaris, that developed into their own schools of law, so to speak, or their own schools of interpretation. And they generally agree, according to someone like Imam al-Sha'rani, on 80% of what they arrived at. And the main differences go back to whether something is obligatory or whether it's merely a recommended act. But in terms of al-haykal, of how it's supposed to be practiced, if you watched a Hanafi praying versus a Maliki, you could barely discern the difference. And unless you were well trained, you couldn't tell the difference. Like, what madhab is he following? So that's kind of where we're at. And we still think this is the best way to go about doing it. And inshallah, this is something that Allah has given tawfiq to, and He's chosen by this particular way for the religion to be preserved and to be practiced. And I think this is going to be the case until there are no more days left in this dunya. Allahu A'lam. So we left off, we are still in Kitab At-Tahara wa Salah. So dealing with purification and prayer. This book goes through all of the abwab, goes through all of the different chapters, and generally it's 4 major sections. So we're still in the first quarter of it, which is dealing with ibadat or acts of worship. The second one will deal with marriage and divorce, ahwal shakhsiyya, which is like personal family law, or dealing with marriage and divorce and things that are related to that, hadana, custody, and so forth. The third section will deal with al-mu'amalat, or transactional or commercial transactions. And then the last one will deal with, which he doesn't have too much of here, because it's not that applicable, but there's a little bit of it, which is al-aqdiyya or shahadat, things that deal more with court testimony and judgeship and things of that nature. So we reach the section of what's called faslun fi sujud at-tilawa. So this is a section dealing with the prostration of tilawa. Tilawa means to recite. So it means recitation of Quran. And as we know, prostration is one of the 4 components of prayer. The other 3 being the qiyam, which is standing up, the ruku', which is bowing, the julus, which is the sitting part, and then there's prostration. And prostration is kind of the one that is the, how do we say, like, they're all important, but we identify most with the prostration for several reasons. One chief amongst them is that in some of the narrations it indicates that the servant of God is no closer to God except or in his prostration. And there's a type of even a physical aspect to it when the head is lower and the heart is raised and so forth. We name our places of worship based upon the prostration, right? Where do you think the word masjid comes from? Comes from sujud. So we don't call it marka', which would be the place of ruku'ah, even though that technically you could. We don't call it maqam, generally speaking, the place where you stand. Well, we call it masjid, right? Because the sujud is kind of, the sha'ira, the main identifying fixture of the prayer. So there's different types of sujud. There's the ones that occurs in the prayer. Previously to this, we covered the sujud of prostration, the sujud of forgetfulness. So that means when someone forgets something, that's a sunnah in the prayer, that there's a way to remedy the prayer, and we covered that. And now we're up to what's called sujud at-tilawa, which is when a particular type of verse is recited from the Quran, and this particular type of verse, usually what will be the contents or the meaning of the verse, is asking for sujud. Or it's telling the believers to make sujud, or it's recounting of how certain believers made sujud. So, generally speaking, it's a sunnah for the reciter, if they are reading the Quran and they come across one of these verses, if they have the conditions, the proper conditions, which we're going to read about in a second, of wudu and so forth, for them to make the sujud at-tilawa, which is one sajda only. So he says, رضي الله عنه, يسن للقارئ محصل شروط الصلاة في غير وقت نهي السجود في 11 موضعا. It is sunnah for the qari', right? For the one who is reciting. And remember how we said this is the creme of the creme. So the way that they choose their words means, in as much as the things that they say the things that they don't say also are important, the things that they leave out. So when he said يَسُنْ لِلْقَارِئ, that means لَا يُسُنْ غَالِبًا لِغَيْرِهِ. So if it's sunnah for the qari, it doesn't mean necessarily it's sunnah for the listener. So you have the one who's actually reciting, and then you have the one who might be around. Because people invariably ask this question. It doesn't happen too much in a place that's not a Muslim country, but in a Muslim country, you hear Quran all the time. Whether on the radio or whether in people praying in their house, and you hear a verse. That's one of the verses of Sujud, and you're like, should I just go make prostration in the street right then and there? No, not according to the Maliki, because you're not the qari. You're not the one who's making the recitation. You're sami'. You may not even be mustama'. Mustama' means that's what you're doing. Like if I was reciting here and you're all sitting here with me, listening to the recitation, then you would be called mustami'een. And the mustama' is the one who's actually almost like the qari, because that's what the purpose of you being there is to listen to it. That person also can make sujood. But someone outside of that, right, who's not in that, they don't have to. Nor should they. Right? If they just passing by, they hear it. So he's going to go over that also after we go over the certain points. So he says, يُسَنَّ لِلْقَارِئ, so the one who's reciting, مُحَصَّل لِشُرُوطِ الصَّلَاةِ, the one who has the conditions that would be the same conditions for prayer. And he just said in 3 words what earlier he said in maybe a few lines, because then you have to say, what are the conditions for the prayer? I have to have wudu, I have to be in a state of ritual purification, as well as physical purification, taharat al-hadath wal-khabath, which means nothing on my person or my clothes, right? Or in the place I'm going to make sujood, that is of najasa, that is considered ritually impure. I have to have my awra covered, right? I have to have facing the qibla. So these are all things that are included in shurut as-salah, right? Shurut sihhat as-salah, I should say. For the prayer to be valid, I have to have the same things. Otherwise, I don't do it. في غير وقت نهي. غير وقت نهي means in a time where it's not permitted to pray. So the same rules apply. So like when the sun is rising, right at the sunrise, right at the sunset. After Asr, after you've prayed the Fard, which is after al-Isfirar, and after the sun goes down to a degree where you are now in the Darura time, you're now in what's called the necessary time of Asr, then you would not pray at that time until after Maghrib, for example. So you wouldn't do it during those particular times. Where in the Quran? السجود في 11 موضعا. 11 different places in the Quran. You might say, well, some of the other schools mention up to 14. Yes. Why does the Maliki have 11? Well, they don't take the 2 in Juz Amma, right? Like Surah Al-Alaq. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من أكرم الذي علم القلب علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. Then at the end, then there's no sujood in that surah for the Malikiyah, and also Surah Al-Inshiqaq. They don't have a sujood, and they don't have a sujood in the second sajda in Surah Al-Hajj. So those 3 right there, most of the other schools, I believe the Shafi'iyya, consider them to be a place of sujood. You might ask, well, why don't they have the same? Isn't it, the words themselves indicate sujood? And the answer would be yes. But there's an asl عند المالكية. There is a source of juridical rulings called Amal Ahl al-Madina. So Amal Ahl al-Madina means that which is the consensus of the ulama of Medina, not just the people in the street, but what has been transmitted in the scholar tradition of the Medinese ulama. And they said that those particular, they said fil mufassal. Mufassal means the surahs that come at the end of the Quran. Why is it called a mufassal? Min kathrat al-fasl. Because there's a lot of fasl, or division between them, because they're short surahs, right? So you have surah, then a divider, then another surah, then a divider, and so forth. So it's called a mufassal. there's an indication from Ibn Abbas that the Prophet ﷺ, when he arrived into Medina, he stopped doing sujood at-tilawa in the mufassal. So Imam Malik, for that reason, said we don't do it except in these 11 that come before all of that. And these 11 are Akhir al-A'raf, so the last verse in Surah al-A'raf. وَيُسَبِّحُونَ لَهُ وَيَسْجُدُونَ. After al-Asal in Surah al-Ra'd, وَيُؤْمَرُونَ في Surah al-Nahl, خُشُوعًا Surah al-Isra, right, which is ayah 109. So I'll say the verse numbers too. So the A'raf is 206, al-Ra'd after ayah 15, al-Nahl after ayah 50. يخافون ربهم من فوقهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. Surah al-Isra, ويخرون للأذقان يبكون ويزيدون خشوعا, that's ayah 109. Surah Maryam عند بكية إذا تتلى عليهم آيات الرحمن خروا سجدا وبكية, that's 58 of Maryam. And then the first one in Surah Al-Hajj, which is ayah 18, وَمَنْ يُهْنِ اللَّهُ فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ مُكْرِمٍ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَفْعَلُ مَا يَشَاءُ. And then Nufura, which is Surah Al-Furqan, ayah 60, which is أَنَشْتُدُ لِمَا تَأْمُرُنَا وَنَزَادَهُمْ نُفُورًا. And then Surah 26 of Naml, Allahu la ilahu Rabbul Arsh al-Azim after that. And then Surah Al-Sajda, ayah 15, وَسَبَّحُوا بِحَمْدِ رَبِّهِ وَهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. And then Surah Sad, ayah 24, فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا رَبَّهُ وَخَرَّ رَاكِعًا وَأَنَابَ. And then the last one, Surah فُصِّلَتْ وَاشْهَدُوا لِلَّهِ الَّذِي خَلَقَهُنَّ إِن كُنتُمْ إِيَّاهُ تَعْبُدُونَ. So those are the 11 for the Malikiyya that they make sujood for. As a Maliki, can you make sujood in the other places? It's not a big deal. It's fine. And if you feel like there's a khilaf, there's a difference of opinion, and I think, it seems like the other verses, that's okay too. But Imam Malik also and Maliki have a strong reasoning, basically Amal Ahl al-Medina. In terms of how it's done, he says here, وَيُكَبِّرُ فِي الْهُوِيِّ لَهَا وَالرَّفْعُ مِنْهَا بِلَا إِحْرَامٍ وَلَا سَلَامٍ. So al-Hawi, so if I'm sitting, then I will just say Allahu Akbar once as I'm going down. This is called al-Hawi. And we know that from the prayer. So the Malikiyya, they say whenever you say Allahu Akbar, except Takbirat al-Ihram, which is the one at the beginning, you say it during the entire motion of the movement from one position of prayer to the next. So if I was standing and then I'm about to go down in ruku', I'd say Allahu Akbar. So I begin with the Hamza in Lafz al-Jalala, standing up, and then the Ra will be on my tongue when I position myself for ruku'. So the same thing here. Allahu Akbar. So the Ra, the last letter in Allahu Akbar, will be on my tongue when I put my head on the ground and I'm settled on the ground. That's called al-Hawi. Bila ihram wala salam. So there's no say Allahu Akbar then go down, which I think that Hanafis have. And there's no salam. You don't say assalamu alaikum. It's just one sajda and that's it. What do you say when you're in the sujood? Anything, any type of tasbih. There's some riwayat that says سجد وجهي لله خلق وشق سمع بصر بحوله وقوته فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين. هذه رواية that you can say, and it's a type of tasbih that when you're in sujood التلاوة. وسجد سامع إذا جلس ليتعلم وصلح القارئ للإمامة. So, how I said earlier, where you have the qari, the one who is reciting, what he does is going to affect what the people listening are doing. So here he says, سجد سامع إن جلس يتعلم وصلح القارئ للإمامة. And it's also assumed that the qari is also making sujood. So 3 things. 1, if you're there actually listening, right, or you're studying with the person who's the reciter, that's your purpose of being there. That's 1 condition. The second, صَلَحُ الْقَارِئُ لِلْإِمَامَةِ. The person who is reciting is also qualified to be an imam, which means post-pubescent man and knows enough about the prayer, Muslim, all those things, obviously, that then you can make sujud based upon their imamah, because it's like you're following them. So they're sort of like your imam, even in the sujud at-tilawa. So that also means that they too make the sujud for the tilawa. So then everyone else would follow. Those 3 conditions. Otherwise, you don't do it. You don't have to do it. وكره لمحصل الشروط تركها وقت الجواز ومنه بعد العصر للإسفرار وبعد الصبح للإسفار. Now, what's disliked about it? كره. Yani disliked means it's better not to do this, though it's technically permissible, but it's better not to. لمحصل الشروط. For whom? The one who has all of the conditions. Whether it's the reciter or the mustama', the one who's listening and has the conditions. تركها وقت الجواز. Not doing it in a permissible time. So you're reciting like, I don't feel like it. Next verse. Makruh. Yani disliked. It's better for you to do it because it's a sunnah. Because sunnah and karahiyah, they're on the opposite sides of the spectrum. So leaving out a sunnah most of the time is going to be something that's makruh. Like in this case. ومنه بعد العصر الإسفرار وبعد الصبح للإسفار. And that also means after Asr, the Jawaz, up until Isfirar, as I said, until the Daruri time, it's still permissible. وَبَعْدَ الصُّبْحِ لِلْإِسْفَار. And also after the Subh prayer until the time of Isfar, when the light begins to show, but not sunrise yet. كَتَعَمُّدِهَا بِفَرْضٍ فإن قرأ فيها أو في نفل سجدها ولو بوقت نهي. Also disliked is to purposefully recite a verse of tilawa in a fard prayer, whether you're the imam or you're by yourself. Disliked. Even Surah Al-Sajda on Fridays, which is, there's riwayas that it's to be recited on Fridays, Surah Al-Sajda, in the first rak'ah, and then Surah Al-Insan, هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا, in the second rak'ah. Imam Malik didn't like it. Why? You can make the argument that Imam Malik, maybe this is not particular to him, but something you can certainly decipher in his way of reasoning is he didn't want something to appeal to the uneducated or less educated, something that it's not. He said, if you do the sujud within the prayer, and many of the awam, of the laity, may not even be familiar with that, they'll think that it's 3 rak'ahs instead of 2. And that actually happened. There's historical anecdotal narrations that say people were reading Surah they said Fajr prayer is 2 rak'ahs every day of the week, except Fridays when it's 3. Because they just followed the Imam, right? And he's doing his sujud at-tilawa after the sajda in Surah Al-Sajda, and then they came back up, and then he got up again and started reciting again. So they thought that was a second unit, second rak'ah, when in fact it's still part of the first. So Imam Malik had kind of this way of looking at things. For the same reason, he also said, for example, Sittat Shawwal, the first 6, fasting the first 6 days of Shawwal as a sunnah, he disliked it because he felt people would think it's part of Ramadan or takmilat Ramadan, something that's added to Ramadan, and so forth. So that was kind of Imam Malik, part of his usul, looking at things like that, which you can make a strong argument for. So it's disliked to recite it in fard. فإن قرأها, but if you do فيه, in the fard prayer, أو في نفل سجدها. So if you do it in voluntary prayer or you do it in an obligatory prayer, even though it's disliked, you still should do the sujud anyway. وَلَوْ بِوَقْتِ نَهِي, even if it's a time when you're not supposed to be praying necessarily, but you prayed, and you should still do the Sujud tilawa. This probably comes up more in things like Ramadan when you're reading Taraweeh, and there's you're going to go through the 11 or the 14 or whatever if you're reading a juz in Taraweeh. What I like to do if I was leading it, or I would tell the Imams, let people know before. That, tell them like, oh, in this rak'ah there's a Sujud tilawa, so they're prepared for it. Especially when people can't see the Imam and they hear him say Allahu Akbar, and then they hear silence, and then they hear Allahu Akbar again, and he starts reciting again, and they're like, what just happened? If they don't know. So many people don't know where the mawada' tilawa are. They don't know where they are. So it's good to kind of to announce that. That's my general advice for that. وإن تجاوزها بكآية سجدها أو بكثير أعاد القراءة وسجد ولو بفرض. What happens if you forget to, if you're praying and you forget to go down for Sujud Tilawa and you already went on to the next verse? So he says, وَإِن تَجَاوَزَهَا بِكَآيَةٍ. So if you pass it by an ayah or two, سَجَدَهَا. After you recite the next ayah, it's okay. وَبِكَثِيرٍ. But if it's like a lot, like more than 3 or 4, أَعَادَ الْقِرَاءَ وَسَجَدَ وَلَوْ بِفَرْضٍ. أَعَادَ الْقِرَاءَ. If you remember, then go back to the verse and then recite it again and then do the sujood as-sahw, even if it's in a fard. فإن انحنى لقصدها فركع سهوا خر لها وسجد بعد السلام إن أطمأن فيه. Let's say you're about to go into Sujud at-Tilawa, which is not something you do very often in your prayer, and then instead you wind up in ruku'. And you're like, oh wait a minute, I'm supposed to go into Sujud, and now I'm in ruku'. What do I do now? So he says, فإن انحنى لقصدها فركع سهوا. Sahwan means you didn't mean to. خر لها يعني للسجدة, then go down from there if you're in that position. وسجد بعد السلام إن اطمأن فيها. And then you do the prostration of forgetfulness after the salam, because you added something extra, which is this ruku' part that you did in the beginning. ومن انحنى لركوع ساهيا عنها فات تداركها في الفرض وأعاد قراءتها في ثانية النفل قبل الفاتحة أو بعدها وسجدها. However, من انحنى لركوع ساهيا, if you go down in your ركوع عنها and then you're ready to come back up, you can't go down to the sujood at this point. فات تداركها, you can't make it up. So what do? أعاد قراءتها في ثانية النفل. Then you would recite it in the next rak'ah after the Fatiha or قبل الفاتحة. So قبل الفاتحة أو بعدها وسجدها, and then you make the sujood at that point in the second rak'ah, the tilawa, and then you don't have to do anything else. Thing he didn't mention here that's mentioned in Sharh al-Saghir, if you're studying or memorizing, like say Surah al-Sajda, every time I recite it, do I have to make sujood? No, just the first time. So if it's being repeated for learning purposes, then you only have to do it once. You need not do it every time that it's being recited. And this is something obviously Quran schools and memorization, they're aware of that. So only the first time. Wallahu a'lam. So that's the chapter of Sujud at-Tilawa. We'll start the next chapter, perhaps finish it, which is about Salat al-Jama'ah, or the congregational prayer. So the Jama'ah in general, the congregational prayer, is something that is sunnah in the madhab. In other words, if one is able to do it, then one should do it. There are hadith, 2 particular hadith that mention that it's either 25 or 27 times as meritorious. One of them mentions the word daraja, degrees, better than praying by oneself. In the Maliki school, Jama'ah is technically counts for 2 people, even though in Arabic language we would say Jama'ah is 3. So if it's a man and his wife, that's technically a Jama'ah. But we don't say there's a tafadul Like we wouldn't say, you know, I prayed Jama'ah already, now I'm going to go pray with this bigger Jama'ah to get more. We don't, that's not in the school. However, one congregation can be more meritorious than the other based upon, you know, if it's in a masjid, who the people are that are there, so forth, these type of things. And obviously in Masajid al-Thalath, the three masajid, Mecca, Medina, and Al-Aqsa, carry more of a meritorious degree to them than all the other masajid. To the degree that if you prayed Jama'ah already, this, I think it's going to come up here. If you prayed, say, Dhuhr, let's say you're on the way to Mecca and you prayed Dhuhr on the way, and then you get to Mecca and Asr hasn't come in and you're in the Haram, you actually pray Dhuhr again if you're a Maliki by yourself to get the reward of praying in the Haram, of praying inside the Haram in Mecca. And the same would go for Medina and the same would go for Al-Aqsa, those three masajid. So he says, Rahimahullah, Al-Jama'atu bi fardin ghayri jum'ati sunnah. So a congregation in obligatory prayer outside of Jum'ah is sunnah. Why? Don't you have to do it for Jum'ah? No, but then it's fard. There's no such thing as Jum'ah by yourself. So Friday congregational prayer doesn't carry any meaning if you're doing it by yourself. In fact, we're going to go over it. There's going to be several other conditions for the Friday congregational prayer. But the sunnah ruling applies to all the 5 obligatory prayers outside of the Friday prayer. So it's a sunnah. And you could probably also make the argument that it's a sunnah kifa'iyya for any group of Muslims, that there should be congregational prayers being observed in a masjid, even though for the individual they should be going, but as a community, then they should try to make sure that's happening. So the first thing he goes over here is when do you make the Jama'ah? Like, when can you say, I have prayed the congregational prayer? Obviously, if you get to start from the beginning, that's a no-brainer. But what if you don't start from the beginning? So here, this is what he's going over now. So he says, وَمَنْ وَصَلَ لِحَدِّ الرُّكُوعِ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَطْمَئِنَّ إِمَامُهُ قَائِمًا فَقَدْ أَدْرَكَ الرَّكْعَةَ وَفَضَّ الْجَمَاعَةِ وَانْسَحَبَ عَلَيْهِ حُكْمُ الْمَأْمُومِيَّةِ. So, you make Jama'ah by making at least one unit. So, prayers are divided into either 2 or 3 or 4 units, depending on which one it is. So you need to make at least one, whether it's 4 like Dhuhr and Asr and Isha, or 3 like Maghrib, or 2 like Subh or Fajr prayer. So he said, "When وصل لحد الركوع قبل أن يطمئن إمامه قائما فقد أدرك." So my Imam, I see them, they're praying, and he's in the ruku'. And people know that if you've ever been in a masjid, especially, I hate to say in the Muslim world or some places, and you hear like the Olympic 400-meter relay behind you, you know that people are running to try to make the Imam while he's still in this ruku'. That's actually disliked, makruh, to run. You shouldn't run. In fact, there's a hadith in Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ, the exact same thing happened, and he heard this noise, and he said, that which you make, and that which you miss, but don't run. It's not proper etiquette. Anyway, so if the Imam is in the ruku' and he's coming on his way back up, if you catch him before he's completely standing, like his back gets straight, then you've made the rak'ah. But once he's all the way up, you didn't make it.
Even if he said it,
doesn't matter what he's saying, it's where he is. So he's in the ruku', and he's like, Sami Allahu Hamida, and he's coming back up, and he's like this, and then you go, Allahu Akbar, and you're in the ruku', you made it. But if once he's standing up, you didn't make it. So that rak'ah doesn't count for you. So, قبل أن يطمئن, or قبل أن يعتدل is a better word, إمامه قائما فقد أدرك الركعة. Then you made the rak'ah. وفضل الجماعة, and you get the benefit or the meritorious nature of praying in a congregation. Even if you just made that's the last rak'ah, but you made it at that point, you made it. وانسحب عليه حكم المأمومية. This is important, especially for Malikis, this particular part. حكم المأمومية means you are now a ma'moom. You are a follower officially. This is going to be important. Why? Because later on, it's going to depend on whether you can repeat the prayer, or if someone prays behind you and you're already a ma'moom, there's going to be rules for that. So you need to know, am I officially a follower in the prayer? You're officially a follower if you make it at that point. That's what it means when سحب عليه حكم المأمومية. You are ma'moom. In other words, a follower. فيسجد القبلي معه. Here's one ruling that applies. يسجد القبلي. Verse, what does that mean? So he makes a prostration of the before with him. Before what? Prostration of forgetfulness. So let's say my Imam, I catch him in the last rak'ah of Dhuhr, the fourth. And I did the thing where he's like coming up and I come in and 400 meter relay and all that. And I make it. But it turns out that in the first rak'ah, he forgot to recite a surah after the Fatiha, which I wasn't there for. I did not witness that. Now we'll get to the end of the prayer. He's in the tashahhud and he goes down for, he says Allahu Akbar, and he goes down for sujud. And I'm like, what's that for? I didn't notice he missed anything. But you weren't there. What do? You have to make sujud with him because he's your Imam. He's your Imam. Let's say I didn't catch him when he was before this. I caught him after. لا ينسحب علي حكم المأمومية. I am not a ma'moom, I'm not a follower, technically. I'm praying after him, behind him, but technically, I didn't catch the prayer. It's really just ta'addub that I continue with him. And then the Imam goes down for sujood as-sahu, al-qabli, before the salam, which means it's from the prayer, not outside of the prayer. What do I do if I didn't catch him any rak'ahs? I don't go down with him. Then what do? You sit and wait till he comes back up. He says Assalamu alaikum, then you stand and continue your prayer. That's the important part. What if I did go down with him at that point? Your prayer is invalid because you added something to it that's not from the prayer. So you need to know, am I ma'moom? Am I officially, a follower and I have an ID card with this Imam and I'm in with him, or I'm not in with him? That's going to depend on whether you caught one rak'ah with him or not. So that's one ruling. فَيَسْجُدُ الْقَبْلِي مَعَهُ. He does a prostration of forgetfulness with him. وَالْبَعْدِي بَعْدَ قَضَاء مَا عَلَيْهِ. What if I caught him and he did the sujood, he added something. He was in Dhuhr and he recited Fatiha out loud, which you're not supposed to. But that counts as an addition in the Maliki school. So then he does Assalamu alaikum and then he goes down for sujood. What do I do then? Do I go with him? No. I go back up and I do my whole prayer. Then I do that prostration of forgetfulness after my salam, because it's supposed to come after, outside of the prayer. For me, I'm still in the prayer. I still got 3 rak'ahs to go. I didn't do all of them, so I don't do it with him. But if I didn't catch any rak'ahs with him, do I do that sajda al-ba'diyah with him at the end? No, I don't even do that, because I didn't pray with him technically. I'm not an official ma'moom. Does that make sense? It's kind of a little confusing. So وَالْبَعْدِي مَا قَضَاء مَا عَلَيْهِ. So after you finish what you have to do, then you do the one after. وَلَوْ لَمْ يُدْرِكْ مَعَهُ مُوجِبَ السُّجُودِ فَإِنْ قَدَّمَ الْبَعْدِيَّ بَطَلَتْ إِلَّا أَنْ يُقَدِّمَهُ إِمَامُهُ قبل السلام يعني. ولو لم يدرك معه موجب السجود فإن قدم البعدية بطلت. So if I don't wording is a little bit strange. Oh, so if you don't meet the conditions for making that rak'ah as qabli or ba'di, فإن قدم البعدي بطلت. So you saw he did the ba'di, the one after. You did your qada. You came back and then you said, oh, I have a sujood sahu. So you did it before you made salam, but you didn't make any of the rak'ahs with him. Batalat as-salah. Your prayer is invalid because you added something to it, namely that sujood, which you shouldn't have added because he wasn't technically your imam. That's what I think he's saying here. إلا أن يقدمه إمامه قبل السلام, and that's it. Assuming you made it with him, then you also could do it with him. Otherwise, you don't. So that's the technicalities of making a rak'ah. Did I make the rak'ah? Did I not make the rak'ah? And then it includes in those, what does a ma'moom mean? Now he goes on to, well, what about the imam? What are his particular conditions? شرط الإمام أن يكون ذكرا مسلما عاقلا بالغا غير مأموم ولا معيد ندبا وأن يكون عالما بما يجب لها وفيها وبما يفسدها سالما من البدعة والفسق واللحن ومنه إبدال حرف بحرف كالضاد والضاء وفي هذه الأربعة الأخيرة خلاف. So the imam should be male. So in the Maliki school, as in the Hanafi school, even a female imam should not be leading a group of female congregants. So they understood mutlaq al-dhukura, yani. In other words, imam in general has to be male, whether he's leading a group of males or a group of males and females, or even just a group of females. The Shafi'i school allows for a female imam to lead other female congregants. Musliman, obviously. When will this make sense? Well, sometimes these things, if you learn them afterwards. Oh, that guy who actually led us, he's not Muslim. And actually there's stories, anecdotal, how that happened in some places. That this person was an imam for like 20 years and then he went and said, oh, by the way, I'm not Muslim. There's nothing on them, right? They don't have to make up their prayers, it's done. But, you know, if you find out within the time that your imam is not who he says he was, then you can make up the prayer. Aqilan, of sound intellect. In other words, not someone who passes through insanity and out of insanity into sanity, back and forth, or anything like that. Or someone who's sleepwalking. Right? If you ask him, oh, you just led us in prayer. I'm like, really? I thought I was asleep. That's not allowed. Balighan. Balighan mean, this is a poor one I think people lose track of sometimes in some communities. Post-pubescent. So it has to be someone who's a man, not a child, not a boy. And I know in many communities, the young men who are like 11 or 12, not quite pubescent yet, they memorize the Quran and they make them an imam. You can't do that in the fard. Not an obligatory prayer. Maybe in a nafil prayer, like tarawih, but not in non-obligatory prayer. And I don't think it's a good practice either way, to be honest with you. I think it's good to encourage young men and or young boys and so forth, but this is a thing of imama. It's leader, right? It's a leader of a congregation, and that's not going to be just given out lightly. غير مأموم. غير مأموم means not a follower. Remember how we said in Sahab alayhi hukm al-ma'mumiyya about the section before? So let's say I made the one rak'ah with the imam, and then I get up, and I'm on my second. Someone walks in late. And they're like, oh, I'll just join this brother. And he stands behind me and says, Allahu Akbar. He can do what he wants. There's nothing you can do about it. But in the Maliki school, the one praying behind you, his prayer is invalid. Because I'm a ma'moom. I'm a follower. I can't be a follower and a leader in the same prayer. So that means if I'm walking in, and I'm a Maliki, and I see that the congregational prayer is over, and there are people praying by themselves, I don't pray with any of them. Because they could all be followers. I don't know what they were doing. And even beyond that, Imam Malik didn't like people praying a second congregation after the first one anyway. So if there's Imam Muratib, in other words, a regular Imam in a masjid, I'm not talking about airport musalla that people are in and out of, that's different. But a regular masjid with a regular Imam who's doing the 5 prayers, and that's his designation, and he's already prayed, then you shouldn't pray in another congregation. The Malikiyya even go far as to say And this is the social aspect about Imam Malik that I was talking about earlier. Let's say I'm in a masjid and I'm new to town. I don't know what time they pray, and they pray Asr late. Maybe they're Hanafis or something, and then I already prayed, and I'm just sitting there reading Quran. And then the Imam comes in, the Mu'adhin, they make Adhan, and they're about to pray. And I'm sitting there reading Quran. What should I do? Well, if I've already prayed in a Jama'ah, I can't pray with them. If I haven't prayed in a Jama'ah, like I prayed by myself, I can join them and pray Asr over again. But if I have prayed in a Jama'ah, technically, I already prayed in a congregation. I shouldn't join another one on that basis. They say it's obligatory for you to get up and leave. Don't sit there while they're praying. Why? They said, هذا طعن في الإيمان. Someone else could walk in and be like, why is that guy sitting down and not praying with them? Is there something wrong with the Imam? Is there something wrong with the congregation? Something wrong with the masjid? Something going on here? There's a story that we don't know. So Imam Malik was very concerned, or he took a sign of a conservative approach to what people might be thinking, right, or how they interpret a situation that could lead to a fitna, that could lead to a type of conflict between people. So he took precautions, said, well, why are you sitting there? People will get the wrong idea, get the wrong impression. So, a lot of times we see these kind of rules not really being practiced in most of the masajid, and people are just in and out and praying and so forth. And then other schools kind of allow it, but I think there is a lot of wisdom in the Maliki positions on these issues. Wallahu a'lam. So عاقلا بالغا غير مأموم, not a follower. ولا معيدا ندبا, right, and not someone who's repeating the jama'ah, because you can't be an imam to repeat the jama'ah. So let's say the same group comes in and they say, oh look, Sheikh from out of town, you can lead us in prayer. You've prayed by yourself already, but you would be repeating it, and you say, Malish, I have to take an excuse. Your imam leads, I'll pray behind you though, because you can't lead them because you already prayed. وَأَنْ يَكُونَ عَالِمًا بِمَا يَجِبُ لَهَا وَفِيهَا, and to be aware of the rules pertaining in terms of the prayer, tahara, and all of the fard and the sunnah and so forth, and that which invalidates the prayer, that which corrupts the prayer. سَالِمًا مِنَ الْبِدْعَةِ وَالْفِسْقِ. And also, these last four here, there's difference of opinion about them. And the mashhur of the school, he doesn't say, but the mashhur is it's permissible, but it's disliked. So someone who is of bid'ah or fisq. What's the difference between bid'ah and fisq? Bid'at al-i'tiqad means something that they believe in that's kind of a bid'ah. It's disliked to pray behind someone like that. Something that would be, kind of contrary to Sunni doctrine or Ash'ari doctrine, like if someone thought that Sayyidina Ali was superior to the rest of the Sahaba and his right was taken. That's not kufr. It's not like disbelief, but it's a kind of a bid'ah i'tiqad. Such a person, we can pray behind them. So if the person is Shi'i, for example, and prescribes to 12 or Shi'ism or something like that, it would have to, in my opinion, be more on a case-by-case basis, because that particular aspect may not be problematic, but there may be other things that they believe that are problematic, or even in their practice in terms of wudu and things like this. So it's something I would say to be careful about. Wal-fisq. Fisq means outward sins. This person is known to drink, this person is known to fornicate, so forth like that. That's also disliked, it's not haram. Wal-lahan. ومنه بدل حرف بحرف كالضاد والضاء. كالضاد بالضاء. Lahan means someone who has ujma, can't pronounce the letters particularly correctly because they're not Arab or they didn't learn tajweed properly. And so they say Surat al-Lazina, like our Egyptian compatriots. I'm one of them. I don't say al-Lazina, but that's what they do. Then that's technically, you can pray behind someone like that. But it's better, obviously, to have someone who's it doesn't invalidate the prayer, is what we're trying to say. So, and that's why I said في هذه الأربعة الأخيرة خلاف. ويزاد في الجمعة الحرية والإقامة. If he's the leader of the Jum'ah, in other words, they're leading the Jum'ah prayer, then there's two other conditions. Al-Hurriya, which means they should not be a bondsman, they should not be a slave. We don't have slavery anymore, that's not an issue. But back then, because it's not obligatory upon such a person. So Jum'ah, the one who leads Jum'ah, it should be obligatory upon them. That's why Al-Iqama too. Iqama means they're a resident. even if a temporary resident. So technically on the Maliki, if someone who's just passing through for a day or even just to lead the Jum'ah, that Jum'ah is not valid because the Imam should be someone who's even at least a temporary resident. What are the exceptions? They said the Sultan or the leader or someone who's passing through, and that's part of his, the areas he's responsible for, and that's okay. That's an exception. But otherwise, the idea of the guest khatib really in the Maliki school is not wedded. It's not something that you would find is going to be practiced. It's allowed in other schools. So, I sometimes go and I'm a guest khatib, but in the other schools allow it. But me personally, if I find myself in that situation, I might repeat Dhuhr prayer after. So we're going to get to when we get to the Jum'ah section, but whenever you have some sort of doubt about Friday prayer and its validity, then it's okay to repeat Dhuhr after as a precaution. But again, case by case, and it's maybe not something that you want to let people see you doing or advertise because they may be like, well, what, something with our Jum'ah? And it may be perfectly valid in the Hanafi school or the Shafi'i school. So this also has etiquettes that deal with how we deal with people of other schools of thought. So we may practice our own school of thought, but at the same time, we don't want to be a fitna. We don't want to be a source of tribulation for people who are not doing that. So that means discretion. We have to be discreet, right? So it means you don't pray Dhuhr in a big jama'ah afterwards and announce on the loudspeaker, oh, Jum'ah is invalid because you know what, I'm traveling, I'm not a resident. So you all 1,000 people who came out for Jum'ah today and the uncles and the people, and you have to repeat the prayer. Fitna, tribulation. So keep it to yourself, right? Do it in a way that's discreet. For this session, and we'll continue with the Salat al-Jamal, dealing with Shart Sihat al-Iqtida, which are the conditions of validity of following. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.